Hello, this is Stephen Baltz. I'm the computer apps instructor here at Ozarka College, and what I'm going to do in this second video for Access Module 2 is I'm going to start on page AC 89 and work through the rest of the module with you. Okay, and so in the first module, or in the first video of Module 2, I took you through the steps to create the first 9 numbered queries 1 through 9, which are shown here in the navigation pane, and then also we created the account city query as well. So just make sure that if you haven't worked through video 1 for Access Module 2, you'll need to work through that first, and then you'll be ready to go through this video to create the additional queries and objects in Module 2. Alright, so of course you'll want to make sure that the Pratt Last Associates database is open, and again make sure that you've created the queries that are shown in Module 2 up through page 88, and in this video I'm going to take you through again pages 89 through the rest of the module. Okay, alright, so on page 89 it wants us to learn how to join tables together. So far, all the queries that we worked on were basically based on just one table in the database. But what Access allows you to do when you create queries is you can actually take a couple of fields or a few fields from one table, a few fields from another table, and kind of create the query results with fields from more than one table. And when you do that, you have to do what's called joining the tables together, and you do that basically by adding both tables to the design of the query. And so that's what we're going to kind of learn how to do here. So on page 90, what we want to do is, let's go ahead and close the navigation pane, and then we're going to click the Create tab up on the ribbon. We're going to click the Query Design button, just like we learned how to do in module, or in the first part of this module. And what we're going to do in the Show Table box, we're going to add the Account Manager table first. So we're going to click on Account Manager in the Show Table box to add that table, the field list box for that table, up in the upper pane of the design view window. And then we're going to also add the account table. So you're going to click on Account in the Show Table box and click Add, and then once you've done that, just close the Show Table box. Alright, then we're going to expand both of the field list boxes up here in the upper pane, both the Account Manager and Account field list boxes, so that we can see all the fields. And you do that just by pointing to the bottom boundary and dragging down so that we can see all the fields. And what we want to do is on page 91, step 3, in the design grid, we want to add the following fields from the Account Manager table. We want to add Account Manager number, so we're going to double click on Account Manager number in the Account Manager field list box, and it just adds that field down here in the design grid. This is basically the same process that we went through in the first part of this module. Then the second field we want to add is last name and then first name. So from the Account Manager table down here in the design grid, we should have Account Manager number, then last name, and then first name fields. Okay, now we're ready to add some fields from the account table. So we're going to move our mouse pointer into the account field list box here in the upper pane, and we're going to add from the account table, we're going to add account number and account name fields. Okay, so the 5 fields that we should have in the design grid are Account Manager number, last name, first name, and those all came from the Account Manager table, and then account number and account name from the account table. Alright, then we're going to choose a sort order. We're going to choose a couple of sort orders here. So we want to, under Account Manager number, right here, we're going to click the Sort row, click the down arrow, and we're going to choose ascending as the sort order for the account manager number field. We're going to also choose ascending as the sort order for account number. Okay, so we're going to go over here to the sort, click the down arrow, click ascending under account number. So we should have as the sort the major sort key, or the sort that's going to be done first, will be account manager number, and then the secondary sort key or minor key is account number. Okay, and then we're going to click the run button to run the query. And what we should expect to see in the results is all of the records in the result of the query should be first sorted based on account manager number, which they are, 31 through 58, and then within each one of those sorts, the secondary sort will be done with account name. Okay? Or actually, I'm sorry, account number. Alright, so the major key is account manager number, and then the minor key is account number. Okay? Alright, so we've got that, and now what we want to do on page 92, we need to save this query. So we're going to click the Save button up on the Quick Access toolbar, and we're going to save this as Manager Account Query. Alright, just make sure you type it exactly the way it's shown on step 5 on page 92, and then you're going to click OK. So we've got that saved. Now, next thing we're going to do is learn how to change the join properties for a joined query. So to do this, we're going to return to Design View by clicking the View button up on the Query Tools Design tab, and then we're going to right click the join line, which is this line that is drawn between the like fields between the two tables. Since this is a relational database, the two tables that we created in the Pratt Last Associates database have a like field. The like field between the two tables is account manager number. That field, if you'll notice, appears both in the account table and the account manager table. And the line that draws between the two like fields in the tables is called the join line. And so you're going to right click on that join line and click on Join Properties, and it brings up the Join Properties dialog box. And what we want to do is it gives us three options of how we can display the results of the joined query. We can include only rows where the join fields from both tables are equal, and that's what we just looked at. That's the default. We can also, the second option is the one that we actually want to select, and this is include all records from the account manager and only those records from the account where the join fields are equal. And basically, the reason we're doing this is because there's one account manager in the account manager table that has no accounts associated with that account manager. And so we want to be able to see that account manager's information in the results, even though they don't really have any ties right now to the account table. Alright, and you'll see what we mean in just a second. So what we're going to do is, again, choose that second option, click OK, and then we're going to run the query. Alright, and what we should see is an extra record in the results of our query that we didn't see before, and it's this one right here. Okay, the one I've just highlighted there. Number 42, account manager 42, doesn't have any accounts assigned to him yet. And so it could be that it's a new account manager that just doesn't have any accounts assigned to that account manager yet. And so that's why we needed to change the join properties so that we could display that account manager even though they don't really have any ties to the account table. Alright, so we've got that done. So now what we need to do is save this query. We're going to click the Save button up on the Quick Access toolbar. And basically all we're doing is we're saving basically over the previous query. So we're basically just updating the manager account query that we saved earlier with the same name, but basically with that change to the join properties that we just did. Okay. Alright, so we've got that done. So now we need to close the manager account query. So we're going to click its close button to close it out. Alright, on page 94, what we need to do here is learn how to create a report from a query. Alright, so we're going to open the navigation pane, clicking the shutter bar open close button. We're going to select the manager account query, basically the query that we just created called manager account query. We're going to just select that object in the navigation pane, and then we're going to click the create tab and then click on the report wizard button right up here. Okay, report wizard. Alright, and then just like we learned in module 1, a wizard basically takes us through a series of steps to create an object in Access. In this case, it's going to take us through the steps that we need to go through to create the report that we want to create. Okay, so the first step in the wizard just asks what fields do we want in our report. And in this case, the query itself already includes the fields that we want included in the report. So all we're going to do is click the little button here that looks like 2 right pointing arrows, and that will basically move all the fields from the available fields column over here to the selected fields column. Alright, so you're going to do that, and then click the next button. Alright, then it's going to ask us, do we want to do any grouping levels? And in our case, we do not want to do any grouping, so we're going to click next. And then this next step, it's going to ask us what sort order do we want for our records. Well, in the query, in the manager account query, we've already set up the sort order that we wanted, the 2 sort keys. So since we've already done that, we can just click next. And then this next step of the wizard is going to ask us what kind of layout we want. Just make sure tabular is selected under layout, and then under orientation, make sure that portrait is selected. It should already be selected, and then you're going to click next. Alright, then it's going to ask you what title do you want to use for the report. And you're basically just going to name it Manager Account Report. And it already has the name Manager Account Query there as the default name, so all you really need to do is delete the word query and type in report. Alright, so it should read Manager Account Report as the title. Alright, and then you're going to click the finish button. It'll show you the results of your report. It'll basically, based on the responses that you made to the questions throughout the wizard, it's going to create the report for us. Okay, just kind of compare your report with the picture that you see there on page 95 in your book and make sure your report looks correct. Okay, and then once you make sure it's correct, you can go ahead and close the manager account report by clicking its close button. Alright, now on page 96, we can also, in addition to creating a report based on a query object, you can also create a form based on a query object, and that's what we're going to do next. So on page 96, we're going to select the manager account query in the navigation pane. We're going to go to the create tab up on the ribbon, and in the forms group, we're going to click on form. Okay, we're going to click the form button, and it just generates the form. A form is really the easiest type of object to create and access. All you do is click the form button, it creates the form for us. And then all we're going to do is click the save button up on the quick access toolbar and save this as manager account form. And it already has the name manager account query, so just like we did for the report, you can just delete the word query there and type in form. So it should read manager account form as the name, and then click OK, and then go ahead and close the form. Okay. Alright, so we've got that. Now, The next few pages of the textbook in Module 2, from page 97 through 101, just kind of tells you information about how to export to Excel if you wanted to. I'm going to skip over that because that's not really that critical for us to do in this video. If you're doing, obviously you'd kind of want to work through it on your own. It's not that big of a deal to work through, but it's not really going to affect our database and the objects in it, so I'm just going to skip over that. And so the next thing I'm going to do starts on the bottom of page 101, where we're going to learn how to add criteria to a join query. Okay, so just like on any query that we've learned so far, we can add criteria to the query to limit the results, and so that's what we're going to do. And so what we're going to do is open the navigation pane, and we're going to click the manager account query, make sure it's selected, and then we're going to right click on the manager account query. Alright, and then on the shortcut menu you're going to click on design view. Alright, and we're going to close the navigation pane. Alright, and then all we're going to do basically is add a criterion under the amount paid field. So what we have to do first is add the amount paid field to the design grid. So you're going to go up to the account field list box up here in the upper pane, double click on the amount paid field name so that it adds that field to the design grid. And then all we're going to do is click the criteria row under amount paid and type in greater than 20,000, so that we limit the results of the query to just those accounts with an amount paid greater than 20,000. All right. And then all you're going to do after you get that greater than 20,000 typed into the criteria row under amount paid, you're going to click the run button. It shows the results of the query. Just kind of make sure that that your results match the picture there on page 102. All right, and basically it's the same query that we originally created, the same join query. It's just that we've now limited the results to just those accounts that have an amount paid greater than 20,000. So the whole point of this was to show you that you can limit the results even in a join query, that joins two tables together. You can limit the results by using criteria just like you can with other queries. Alright, so in this case, after we run the query, we don't want to actually save the changes. So we're just going to click the close button for this query. Alright, it's going to ask us, do we want to save the changes? We're going to click on no. Okay, and that way we keep the original join query, that join query that we created earlier. Alright. Alright, so the next thing we're going to learn how to do on the bottom of page 102, it talks about how you can use calculations in a query. A lot of the calculations that we learned how to do in Excel, you can also do in an Access database. Alright, so we're going to kind of learn how to do some of these things, how to do some of the formulas and statistics like average and sum and so forth. Alright, so what we want to do on page 103 is we're going to learn how to do what's called a calculated field, which is basically very similar to a formula that we learned how to do in Excel. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new query with a field list for the account table. So we're going to go to the Create tab up here on the ribbon, just like we've done for our other queries. We're going to click on Query Design, and then it wants us to add the account table. So we're going to make sure account selected in the Show Table box, click on Add, and then close the Show Table box. And just like we've done before, we're going to expand the field list box for the account table up here in the upper pane. And then we're going to add the following fields from the account table to the design grid. So we're going to add account number, account name, amount paid, and current due. Okay, so just make sure you have those 4 fields selected in the navigation or in the design grid down here. And then what we're going to do is right click the field row in the first open column in the design grid. So the first open column would be the 5th column right here where I'm pointing to. And so I'm going to right click on the field row. Alright, and then I'm going to click on the zoom button right here. Okay, what that's going to do is that's going to zoom in on the field box for that first blank column in the design grid, and that's where I'm going to type in my formula or my calculation. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type in the name that I want to use for the new field that's going to be a calculated field in the results of the query, which is going to be total amount. So I'm going to type in total amount and then colon, and the colon is important because that's what separates the field name, the calculated field name, from the actual formula or calculation part of the calculated field. Okay, so this total amount is going to be an actual name, a field name, in the results of the query that we run in just a minute. Alright, so after the colon, you're going to type in a left square bracket, and then amount, space, paid, alright, and then a right square bracket, okay, and that's just one of the fields in our table, amount paid. And you'll have to make sure you spell it exactly the way it appears in your table, okay. The spelling is critical when you do a calculated field, okay, because basically what we're doing is we're telling Access to take the amount paid, and then we're going to tell it to add that to current due to get the total amount for each account. Alright, so our arithmetic operator in this case is going to be the plus sign. So you're going to type a plus sign after you've typed in amount paid in square brackets. Alright, so the plus sign, and then you're going to type in current due enclosed in square brackets. So you're going to type a left square bracket, then current due, and then a right square bracket. And again, the field name current due has to be spelled exactly the way it appears in your table. Alright, once you get that done, check your formula, your calculated field entry with step 2 on page 103. Make sure that it's correct. It should read total amount, colon, amount paid in square brackets, plus current due in square brackets. The square brackets are basically what indicate a field name in the table. It tells Access that we are referring to a field name in the table. Alright, so once you get that done, you're going to click OK in the zoom box. It'll add that particular formula that we just added in as the in the field box for that 5th column of the design grid, and then we're just going to run the query. Okay, and you'll know pretty quickly whether you did that calculated field correctly or not, and whether you spelled everything correctly. If you didn't spell something correctly, if you didn't spell one of the table names correctly or didn't type it exactly the way it's shown in the book, then you're going to have an error come up, or you may just not see the total amount calculated field over here in the result. So the main thing you want to look for in this query result is make sure you have the total amount field over here as the last field in the results, and it should basically be the sum of the amount paid field and the current due field. So just kind of go through and make sure that those make sense, that they're logical, that they this number, this total amount number, should be again the sum of amount paid and current due for each account. So check it against the picture there that you see on page 104 in your book. Alright, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to learn how to add a caption to a query. We learned how to add captions to table names, and now we're going to kind of learn how to do that for names, basically field names in a query. Alright, so we're going to return to design view by clicking the view button. Alright, then we're going to click the amount paid field in the design grid. Alright, click amount paid in the design grid, and then click the property sheet button up here in the show hide group. So we're going to click on property sheet. It opens up the property sheet task pane over here on the right hand side. And all we're going to do is go to the caption box here, which is the last box in the property sheet. We're going to click there, and we're going to type in what we want to basically use as the abbreviation for the amount paid field, which is in our case paid. So instead of it being named amount paid, we're changing it with the caption. We're going to change it how it displays. It's going to display now as paid instead of amount paid. And just basically we're using a caption on a query here for the same reason that we would use a caption in Module 1 when we were setting up the field names for our tables. It's basically to save some horizontal space in our results. Alright, so we've got that one done. Now we want to click on the current due field down here in the design grid and go up to the caption box on the property sheet and type in the word due. Alright, and then we're going to close the property sheet, and then we're going to run the query. And now what we should expect to see, instead of seeing the full name, the field name for amount paid and current due, we should now just see the captions that we set up for those two fields in the results of the query. So just make sure that you have those correct, and then we're going to save this query as M02Q10. So we're going to click the save button, and it will open up the Save As dialog box, and we're going to type in M02Q10. Alright, and then we're going to click OK. So we've got that query saved, and then we're going to close this query by clicking its Close button. Alright, so we've got that done. Alright, now on page 106, we're going to learn how to use stats or statistics in a query. And you do this through using a function, or what's called an aggregate function in Access. It's basically very similar to the functions like the sum function and max function and average function that we learned about in Excel. Basically the same process. Same basic functions that you can use in Excel, you can also use in Access. Alright, so we're going to create a new query. So we're going to go to the Create tab, and we're going to click on Query Design, and we're going to make sure the account table is selected in the Show Table box. Click Add, and then click Close for the Show Table box, and then we're going to drop down the field list box so we can see all the fields in the account table. Alright, and then what we want to do is up here on the Query Tools Design tab sheet up on the ribbon, we're going to find the Totals button in the Show Hide group over here on the right hand side, and we're going to click on Totals. Okay, what that does is that adds the total row to the design grid. By default, the total row doesn't display in the design grid. But if you want to do any kind of stats like average or sum, then you have to add the total row to the design grid. Okay. Alright, so we've done that. Now what we want to do is add the amount paid field to the design grid by double clicking on amount paid in the account field list box. And basically what we want to do here is we want to find the average amount paid amount for all of our accounts. Okay, so we've got the amount paid field added here, and now we're going to click the total row under amount paid in the design grid, and then on the drop down list where it shows all the available stats or functions that we can use, we want to choose average because we want to find the average of the amount paid amount. Okay, so once you have your query designed, like you see there on page 106, where you have the amount paid field added to the design grid and average selected in the total row, then you're going to run the query by clicking the Run button. And what you should see is a value of 22,637.78. All right, that is the average amount paid for all of our accounts. Okay. And it's just one number. An average is just one number. So it might alarm you when you first see that it's just one number in the results, but that's what we asked it to show us. We asked it to show us the average amount paid for all of our accounts together. All right, and so the average amount paid is this number right here, 22,637.78. So just make sure that's correct. And then what we're going to do is we're going to return to design view on page 107. So we're going to click the view button to return to design view. And then we're going to include another field in the design grid. So we want to include account manager number. Okay, because what we want to do next is we want to find the average amount paid for those accounts that are handled by account manager 31. Alright, so we've got amount paid here, we've got our account manager number field in the design grid, and now we're going to click the total row under account manager number, and we're going to choose where. You're going to have to click the down arrow in the total row, and then down at the very bottom you're going to click where. Okay, and then you're going to type in the criteria row under account manager number, you're going to type in the account manager that you're looking for. In this case it is 31. So you're going to type 31 as the criterion under account manager number. So under account manager number on the design grid, it should show where in the total row and then 31 in the criteria row. Alright, then you're going to run the query. And this time, we're looking at the average of amount paid, but only for those accounts that are handled by account manager 31. And you'll see that the number is a little less than what we had before. This time it's 18,511.68. So just make sure that number is correct. Kind of check it with the number that you see there on page 107. And then what we're going to do is save this query as M02Q11. Alright, so we're going to go click the Save button on the Quick Access toolbar, and in the Save As box we're going to type in M02Q11. And then we're going to click OK. Alright, so we've got that one saved. Alright, now we're going to learn how to use grouping on a calculated, or not a calculated field, a statistic type of query. So on page 108, what we want to do is we want to find the average amount paid grouped by account manager number. Alright, so we're going to return to design view, okay, by clicking the view button up on the Query Tools Design tab. And then what we're going to do is we're going to clear the design grid. Okay, just like we learned in the first video, or the first part of this module, when we want to clear the design grid, we click the little gray bar right above the first field in the design grid, and then while holding down the Shift key, we click the right above the last field in the design grid, and it'll select all the fields in the design grid. Then you're going to press the Delete key on your keyboard to clear out the grid. Alright, in this case what we want to do is we want to add the account manager number field to the design grid. Account manager number to the design grid, and then you're going to add amount paid. Alright, so we have account manager number first and then amount paid in the design grid. And what you're going to do is you're going to choose average as the calculation in the total row for the amount paid field. So you're going to choose average here, okay? And the default selection in the total row is group by, and that's what we want. In this case, we want basically the average amount paid, which we've selected here, grouped by account manager number. So we shouldn't have to change anything in the total row under account manager number. Okay, so just make sure your query design is set up correctly. And then what we're going to do is run the query by clicking the run button. And what we should expect to see in this case is 3 sets of numbers. Basically the average of amount paid for each account manager. Alright, so we have 3 account managers that actually have accounts. Alright, 31, 35, and 58. And so it basically shows 3 sets of numbers, one average amount for each account manager number. Alright, so just check and make sure those numbers are correct. Look on page 108 and just make sure that your numbers are correct there. And then what we're going to do is save this query, but this is a reused query because we've already saved this query before as query 11. And so what we're going to have to do to save this query is go to File, up on the ribbon, go to the File tab, then click Save As, Save Object As, and then Save As. And then we're going to type in the Save As dialog box M02Q12. Alright, and then click OK. So we've got that saved with the different name. And then we're going to close the query by clicking its close button. Alright, the last type of query that we're going to learn how to create in this module is called a crosstab query. And a crosstab query is basically where you calculate a statistic for data that's grouped by 2 different types of information. Okay? For example, what we want to do in our case is we want to group data on the current due amounts by state and account manager. Alright? And luckily there is a special tool or a wizard in Access that allows us to create a crosstab query very quickly and very easily by just basically going through and asking us a series of questions on how we want to set up our crosstab query. So on page 109, what we're going to do is click the Create tab, and we're going to click the Query Wizard button, which is right here. So instead of clicking Query Design, which we use for our other queries, we're going to click on the Query Wizard button. Okay? And that opens up a new query dialog box, and it gives us 4 options of wizards that we can use. The one that we want to use is Crosstab Query Wizard, which is the second option there. So we're going to click on Crosstab Query Wizard here, and then click OK. Alright, and just like we've learned before, Wizard basically takes you through a series of steps. It's going to ask us a series of questions, and as we answer those questions, it's going to create the query for us. Okay, so the first question is, which table or query contains the fields that you want to use for the crosstab query results? And in our case, it is the account table. Okay, so we're going to choose the account table up here and then click Next. Okay, you'll notice as we create the query, the crosstab query, it's going to show a preview of what it looks like, you know, kind of what we've already selected. As we've gone through and answered the questions in the query, it's going to kind of create a sample here. This little yellow section shows a sample or a preview of what the query is going to look like. Okay, so you might pay attention to that and make sure that it matches up with the preview that you see there in the book. Alright, so what we're going to do next is it's going to ask us what field values do we want as the row headings. So what you would do in this case is look it shows on page 109 in figure 2-78, it shows what the finished crosstab should look like. Okay, so the rows in the crosstab is going to be the state field. You'll notice that is what creates the rows of the table. Okay, so the state field is what we want to select here. So under the available fields column, we're going to choose state and then click the add field button to make sure that state is in the selected fields column. Alright, then we're going to click next. And you'll notice again it adds state in the preview area as the rows of the crosstab query. Alright, the next step is going to ask us what field values do you want to use as the column headings in the crosstab query. And again, go back and look at page 109, figure 2-78, and you'll notice that the fields in the crosstab query is going to be the account manager number. Okay, so that's what we're going to choose here. So we're going to choose account manager number. That's the field that we want as the column headings. Alright, in our crosstab. So account manager number, then click next. And again, it shows account manager number as our column headings. Alright, so our last step here is to indicate what calculation we want to do that's going to crosstab the state field with the account manager number fields. Okay, and so the calculation that we want to do is going to be on the current due field. So we're going to choose current due. Alright, again, it's asking us what number do we want calculated for each column and row intersection. So we want current due, and the calculation that we want to perform on the current due field is sum. So we're going to choose sum in the functions box here. So current due in the fields box, and then sum in the functions box, and then click next. And then the last step here, it's going to ask us what do we want to name this crosstab query. And so we're going to delete what you see there in the name box, and you're going to type in what's shown there as the proper name on page 111, step 6. So it's going to be state manager crosstab. Okay, just make sure that you type it exactly the way you see it there on step 6 on page 111. And then you're going to click the finish button, and it should show the results of your query. And just kind of go back to page 109, figure 2-78, and make sure that your crosstab results look the same as the picture there on page 109. Alright, just make sure that everything looks correct. Make sure all the numerical values are correct. All these sums are correct. Alright, and make sure your column headings and your row headings are correct on your crosstab query. And then once you make sure all that's correct, just close the query by clicking its close button. And that finishes up this module. The last couple of pages of the module just kind of show you how to customize the navigation pane. You can just kind of work through that on your own. That's not really going to affect your database anyway. So basically, before you submit this assignment, just make sure that you open up the navigation pane and make sure that you have all of the objects, all of the query objects 1 through 12 that we created. And you might even open up each one and just double check to make sure that they all look like they're supposed to. Remember, I've included on the activities page in Miles Arca for the assignment, for the Access Module 2 assignment, I've included under the resources heading a document that shows a list of all of the objects that you should have in this database and what they should all look like. Okay, so make sure you have all the objects that we created in this module. Make sure they're correct. You might, like I said, you might even open up each one and just double check to make sure that they're all correct. Make sure that all the queries and other objects are named correctly. Alright, if they're not named correctly, I'm not going to be able to grade it for you. Okay, I'm not going to be able to give you credit unless they're named correctly. Alright, so just kind of make sure of that. And that concludes Access Module 2. Thank you very much.